Hey, I know in the real world a lot of people have questions about how to best use Lightroom, workflow, and when to use it and how to use it. So in this lesson, I'm going to walk you through a job I'm doing right now. So I've got a bunch of images that are getting ready to go into a book, and I'm going to tune them up. You'll see, and by the end of this lesson, you'll know how to use Lightroom in the real world to quickly and effectively work through a bunch of pictures. Now, before we jump in, let me just say a quick word, right? Photoshop is where you'd go for advanced and really in-depth, most often time-consuming edits. Lightroom is best for doing short, quick edits and then syncing them over a number of different pictures. So for example, in this lesson, we're going to be turning all these images into black and white. Now I can simply desaturate and then sync that adjustment, and I'll have all my pictures in black and white. Now there's a few other corrections we'll make which are fairly straightforward, and I hope you'll see just exactly what I mean by how to most effectively use Lightroom to speed up your workflow. Let's go ahead and jump right in. You can see in the first image that the real problem we need to take care of here is really these electrical outlets. I wish they weren't there, but they are. No problem. All we need to do is go over here in the Develop module and select Spot Removal. I'm going to click on it, but you could also hit Q on the Mac there. Now I've got my pad out here, my tablet that is, but you could do the same thing. So I'm on my mouse pad here and I can simply move that around, or I can use my tablet and my pen and I can move it around also. Remember, the left bracket decreases the size, the right bracket increases the size of the selection, and within that selection brush that we've got here, we can increase the size, the feather, and the opacity. Of course, in this case we want the opacity to be 100 because those outlets need to go away. We could keep it with a feather right in the middle, I think, to start with. We'll see how that looks. And I want a size that's just big enough to cover the width of the outlets. So let's go ahead and get started and see how Lightroom does all on its own here. So I just click and drag, paint across that area, and I don't exactly like what it's done there because it's too dark, I think. But what I can do is click and drag on the right hand side here, and that looks like the right spot to me. So it's now sampling in that area. Pretty amazing feature, thank you Adobe. I click and release, and sure enough, it looks great. Now for the next one here, I'll go ahead and do the same thing. Looks great. And I can go to the next image, so on and so forth. Now you can see here the outlets are smaller in this picture, so I can decrease my brush size and paint there, mouse off the picture there, and sure enough it looks fine. So we're just going to keep going through here, and they'll all be pretty much the same from this point on, where I'll simply draw in the adjustment, make sure it's okay, and then click the right arrow, or I'll just click on the next image there, and that'll advance me to the next one. So you can see how quickly that this adjustment is going for me in Lightroom. And again, it's not a real complicated adjustment, it's pretty straightforward, and that's why I chose to do it in Lightroom, is simply just to save some time here. And we're going to go ahead and paint that in, and paint that in. Looks good, great job Adobe. And we're going to go down the whole lot of them here and get rid of all of those outlets. Next one up, I think 2 quick brush strokes will make short work of it. There we go. And the next one here, brush stroke and brush stroke. You can see that aside from that first one, it's gotten, I think, all the rest of these adjusted correctly, because it's got a pretty sophisticated algorithm for taking a look at exactly what you're trying to remove and good places that it thinks to sample from. And as you can see, it's doing a pretty darn good job of it. And what I'll say in terms of your investment in using Adobe Lightroom is that this algorithm that they've used to determine where to sample and how to remove objects and sort of common tasks that photographers want to do over and over again really has gotten better with time. And if I could look into my crystal ball for a second, I'd tell you what's going to happen with Adobe in the future. They're going to figure out what means the most to photographers or retouchers, and they're going to keep improving those things and adding more features like them. So why do I think that? So if you start Adobe Lightroom, you'll notice they have you take a survey, right? And when you take that survey, they're going to ask you for your feedback and rate it and maybe ask you to contact them. Matter of fact, right before I started this lesson and this photo editing adventure we're on right now, they did that. They asked me exactly, hey, what do you think of Lightroom? And they do this regularly when I start up Lightroom, right? And they're doing that because they want to know what works, what doesn't work, what we as photographers and retouchers want out of Lightroom, and they're going to go ahead and keep reinvesting it because they know that loyalty to the platform, Lightroom and Photoshop, is key to their business, right? Okay, so in that one, you can see that the outlet was bigger than in the other picture, but instead of readjusting my brush, because I'm kind of on a roll here, I can just paint it in slightly larger, okay? A little bit of a problem there. I'm glad it happened. So what I can do is I can actually just click, maybe drag this. Too small. All right, so good. We got one that didn't work. So I'm going to click delete while it's selected, and it's gone. And now what I'm going to do is going to repaint it in this time a little more carefully. And there we go. All right, so it seems that the outlet's changed. So I'm going to do 2-3 clicks of the right bracket key to increase my brush size. I'm going to go ahead and paint there. And sure enough, we're back in business. So I want to walk you through all these images because I don't want to skip any steps, and I want you to see exactly how I used Lightroom on really a bunch of different images. Now, why would I be using Lightroom in this case and not Photoshop? Well, for the first thing, that Photoshop, ooh, we got a tricky one here. This is going to be good. So I'm going to decrease my brush size, and now I'm going to zoom in. Photoshop takes longer to load and longer to work on each individual picture, in my opinion. Lightroom is just so darn fast as long as you get those previews built ahead of time. Alright, so now I'm going to do some delicate painting, perhaps, here. Let's try to get that right. Let's see. Brush is a bit larger than I'd prefer. That's certainly not where I want it to sample. I'm marginally happy with that one, bordering on not happy at all. So I'm going to select it again, and I'm going to delete it. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone instead of heal, right? So we were healing before, which was doing a great job of sampling the area and blending it, but because we're right next to the hand, right, the heal function's not doing me any favors. It's blending the hand into what I'm pasting in. So I'm going to decrease my brush size even more, and this time I'm going to use clone, which what I'm hoping is that the clone will not take into account the hand that's right next to it, but simply what I tell it to look at, and then it will properly clone out the outlet. Okay, so let's take a look here. I think I want to shift this around a touch. Yeah, that looks good. But there's a problem you can see there, and that's that it's showing the outlet where it's right next to the hand still. So perhaps what I can do is decrease the feather. And now check that out. When I decrease the feather, now you cannot almost see any of the hand, to the point where if I zoom all the way out, I would say that that's marginal. That could almost pass for a reflection off her hand, because again, these are going to be printed around this size, so it'll be very difficult to see. So you can see that I could adjust my brush size and change from heal to clone and decrease my feather, in that case, to make what would otherwise have been a complicated edit quite quick in Lightroom. So let's keep going on, because I hope that we'll see something else like that. Nothing for us there. And here you go, you can see that we get a good clean shot of it. So I'm going to switch back to heal and switch my feather right back into the middle here. I'm going to right bracket click to get my brush a touch bigger. I'm going to brush it in. Bingo. Alright, we got some more here. Ooh, let's see if the heal brush can handle this one. Feathered too much. I can see a little bit of the outlet at the bottom, so I'm just going to, look at that, disappeared just by bringing it down a little bit there. Let's keep going, because we're working our way through these in short order. Repetitive task, largely the same, fairly straightforward. Lightroom is doing a great job. You can see here saving me tons of time. Photoshop would take longer to load, would take longer probably to work on these images, and just the entire workflow is a bit longer. So I like to use Photoshop when it's a complicated high-end retouching task, and Lightroom when it's fairly straightforward. Now, you might be saying, well, yeah, okay, the images load faster, but, the actual edit itself in terms of brushing out this electrical outlet in each one of the pictures, that task is probably about the same amount of time in Photoshop and Lightroom, and I will give you that. Like, the actual part of painting it in probably is, but here's the deal. What we're going to do next, and I'm making you suffer along with me as we go through all these, because I want you to see all the eventualities, right, and circumstances we might see while we're retouching these. We've seen a few already. But what you'll see next is that once we're done, I'm really setting the pictures up for what's going to happen next, which is the real time saver. Because we're going to apply a black and white setting to all of them after we figured out the one that we like, right? So we're getting real close, I think, here to the end. All good stuff. I can see that in the status bar down at the bottom, out of the corner of my eye. And everything's looking good still. Very happy with all these adjustments that we're making. All right, down to the last few, which is great.